my guest one. Okay. I think I'm in now.
In the either Sheldon or Oh, for the county. Yeah, for the county line.
Where did we quit?
Expenditures, you put sticky.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Any closer, it'd bite me.
Well, we use bright colors, you know, to help people.
I need all the help I can get. Ready for the home. More fun, man. Wonderful. Hey, Sam. Good, you?
I shot it as well and kind of.
Oh, Wayne.
So this is under 4.
Hello.
Well, Wayne's over 4. You gotta nominate him.
Excuse me. 38, thank you very little.
I knew you were very street, that's why. Actually, I'm under 42 the way I do my birthday. When I turn 45, I start doing building direction.
Oh, there you go.
So I think I'm in.
Yeah, what about those who were born on leap year?
He's 7.
I had a friend, or a classmate that was born close to Easter. I was born one day later. Oh, that's right, yeah. And we were like, no.
So Scott Westra, who's the son of Gary Westra, who worked at the bank, he was born on leap year. And we used to tease him on the school bus about being 2 years old.
Again. Hello.
Yeah, because it's completely backwards the way it is right now.
Encouraged all the other people getting the other request list. I think golf course might be here.
Wayne, would there be a reason I wouldn't be able to connect to my downstairs phone here?
What are you trying to your?
This is the one that you made so I can log in from home.
So since you're here, you don't need to use the Firebox part?
Oh.
Because you're already inside the main network.
Oh, but I tried that, and it told me there was one of 3 reasons. But anyway. And maybe I don't need it, I just thought it might be helpful if we're switching a bunch of law stuff.
Yes. It's rebooted.
Okay.
Sent me a letter.
Oh. Need to be on security.
So I tried that.
You must ask
So I went to the guest one.
Yeah, because the guest one, for security purposes, you can't access.
Cool, yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
I guess they can
if
say
I need
that
it,
it's for.
then maybe I'll have you help me.
I'll see if I can.
Okay, that's fine,
Well,
let's just,
did they spend
let's
it?
just, yeah, okay. What?
Well, they only were given 5,000.
Yes.
Okay. So it used to be 15. Okay. So, allocate. They must be saving it, so ask them. Probably be cheaper.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4:30, so I'd like to begin by standing for a moment of silence, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if we could have roll call, please.
Tom Eggers,
Here.
Wayne Barahona,
Here.
Pete Hamill,
Here.
Ken Snyder,
Here.
Brad Hinn.
We've already approved the agenda, yesterday, so at this point, public forum, are there any comments that anyone would like to make that's in attendance today? That doesn't relate to something down further on the agenda? Right. Then, let's move down to
I just said that now.
item 6C. We finished yesterday on page 15 of the expenses, if I'm correct, if I have that right? So we will start in there right after the transfer in-out totals, about a third of the way down the page. And Ange, the floor is yours.
Excellent. All right, going on with the library here, I think Nicole kind of explained that. They did do an increase on page 16 to their book line item by $4,000. She explained their capital equipment and capital improvement for $14,500. On to page 17 is the airport. You'll see that they did a small increase for the FBO contract, fencing, and then their capital items. That was a wish list that they put in, and they had an influx of cash, so we added it to the upcoming budget. Moving on to 18, the park. Not a lot of change there. They still are going to, in their capital improvements on page 19, some tree removal, bathroom updates, sidewalk improvements, bench, and table replacement. Museum has a slight increase on the repair and maintenance to the building and structure. They just need some more upkeep on the outside. They did increase their operating supplies for the, excuse me if I murder it, sesquicentennial coming up. Then on to page 20. Here we're going to get into some things that aren't used very much. There's the DARE program. They only use what they have in the account. Then on page 21 is the ambulance depreciation items. That is only the ambulance items this year, as well as their new ambulance vehicle. Kristen talked about that. On to page 22, the cemetery care 5,000, that's the upkeep of the stones. The fire protection capital, that is in case we have to use more money to rent the aerial truck that we currently have. Questions so far? All right, on to page 23. There's the hotel motel tax that gets paid out to marketing committee and civic center. And then you've got your rec trails. They're planning the trail around the pond that they fundraised for and got grants for, so that's that $625,000, as well as it includes their annual upkeep. Then on to roads on page 24.
Before we turn the page.
I'm sorry, yes.
Hotel motel, is that based on pre-COVID results? Is that where we project, because it's a significant increase, but
It is.
think it's going to be back where we used to be?
We do. Kurt and I have kind of talked about that, the past couple quarters have really seemed to bounce back.
Okay,
So,
very good.
we'll only transfer or give them what we receive.
All right.
So, okay. Road use, Todd kind of touched on that. They've got some street repairs in there and some storm drainage that they're going to do on page 25. That's a pretty good increase of some different projects that they're looking to do. Snow removal, same. The traffic control is the same. On to page 26, the road use depreciation. Their mower, trailer, blade, all of that, the fuel item, or excuse me, fuel item, island. Okay. Okay, pages 26 through 32, 3 are all the employee benefits. That's just equations that I use from their wages, and we did include for group insurance a 10% increase. So if you want to look through that, did you have any questions?
So when you look at taxes, Angie, when you look at taxes, how do you estimate that far out? Any changes in those?
So IFRS releases their numbers. We already know what their rates are going to be for the upcoming year, and we expect no change in FICA and Medicare.
Okay, that's all I was wondering.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good? So on page 33 then, the transfer out from the emergency fund, that is the levy that that's the levy we levy for, and then that goes into the general fund. The seizure fund is there if the police department needs to use it. Then we're down to loss. And the property and casualty insurance there, the mosquito control comes out of loss, and then the other payments, which we'll talk about when we get to the loss section, the transfers out. Okay,
Where we at?
did you have, okay, page
You're-
35,
you
did you have
left
an extra page 33 in there? I thought you did, sorry.
Yes, I do.
It's okay. All right, then we get to TIP. The Children's World contribution, we did put in the O'Brien County Economic Development contribution, the $45,000 to SEDC that they asked for, TIP rebates, we've got quite a few of those going on right now. And then the TIP improvements that we'll get to in the TIP section. Transfer out from TIP is to debt, that goes to debt payment. Any questions? All right. Page 36. LMI, that's being transferred out to the TIP LHAP program. That's one that we're consolidating. The Aquatic Center sinking also is another one we're consolidating into the Aquatic Center capital project.
What is LMI?
Low to moderate income.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. And then on to page 37. Is the debt payments, the principal and interest. 37 and 38 both are. Okay, on to page 39. There is the pavilion building storage that Tricia talked about. Sewer lift upgrade transfer out, that's another one that's going into sewer to close that fund. Then we've got the street patches and repairs and stormwater improvements, that's the capital fund that Todd talked about that we're using for different street projects. Any questions? Page 40 is the Sunshine is a transfer out, as well as the 2011 capital improvement fund. We can cover those on transfers. That's more consolidating of those capital funds that we talked about. On to page 41. That 2017 capital improvement, that is actually Crossroads North Phase 2. We're hoping to get that completely done this year, so there's nothing being budgeted out of that. Sheldon Crossing, that's transfer out. Again, we'll talk about that in the transfers, another capital fund that will be closing. Questions? Page 42. dangerous and dilapidated, that money comes from loss. Then we've got the 391, which is the Street Capital Improvement Fund. That's the $2.5 million that Todd has in projects that he has bid and is going to bid. Then on page 43, we're going to move the Drunger out as well. We'll talk about that in transfers. Then getting on to water. The third line down, that overtime, there's supposed to be $8,500 in the current year. I've got to fix that. I apologize. I missed that one.
What do you mean?
Right here.
In the new
current,
budget?
Yeah, in the new budget. That's supposed to be $8,500. So it's not an increase. I just missed putting it in.
Okay.
And page 44, you see about the same, maybe a little bit of increase on some different things, especially utility or the electric. Both water and wastewater, we had to increase sample analysis because we got informed they were increasing theirs by 15%. On to page 45.
Could I ask a question?
Yep.
In regards to utilities, specifically gas? We've seen quite an increase, and there's talk about additional. How did we compensate for that in this budget?
So the wastewater plant is all electric.
Okay.
So we're good there.
We're fine, yeah.
The water plant does not use large sums. We put a small increase in, because even if it goes way up for these winter months, the amount we consume is not going to be a large amount.
Okay.
So small increases and hoping it doesn't last long.
Okay, thank you.
And recall, what we're budgeting for is for not this winter,
Right.
next winter.
Right. I'm just thinking inflationary pressures that we're seeing today aren't gonna go away for this budget period.
Right.
So,
You know, the good thing is for the water plant, for instance, the utility gas line item was $5,500.
right.
And we increased it to $6,000. It's not a huge increase, but if
Yeah.
I'm off, we're only off maybe by $500.
Yeah, I really wasn't so much concerned about the dollars as it was just how did we calculate it? Is there a percentage of increase that we put to it, or?
No, I just increased them all by a few $100s because it's not, like I said, it wasn't big money, so I didn't spend a
Okay.
ton of time on top.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Ange, go
That's
ahead.
all right. Okay, on page 45, what I touched on a little bit yesterday, you'll see a line of water deposit refunds because we're moving all the water deposit money into the water fund, again, to consolidate that, and that's when people move out, when they get their deposit back. Down towards the bottom is that third of the 2 copiers for the office. And then,
Before we go on.
Yes.
Mosquito control,
mosquito control is completely paid out of local option
okay.
sales tax now.
I knew there was something goofy there, but I
Yep.
didn't remember what it was.
Yep. Bottom of the page, you'll see we don't have a principal payment anymore. Okay. Okay, moving on to 46, the water improvement fund. So there is, this is the Lewis and Clark. So the money for the Lewis and Clark project, and then the money that we pay for the Lewis and Clark water that goes to Clay Rural Water that they're paying us for. Then on to page 47, water depreciation. So it's just their capital line item there. It's just that bottom line, FlexNet, engineering, and doors. Then you see the transfer out from the water deposits. That's going to water. Question?
You're transferring the money for the water meter deposits. Do you still keep track of how much, X dollar we owe people so we don't spend that?
Can you mic down, please?
Sorry.
So we do, because
Okay.
we have a water deposit report, so
Okay.
we'll keep track of who all has it, what their dollar amount was that they paid, because we do still have
The obligation.
the old, and the old dollar amounts, when the deposit was 125 or when it was 100. So we have all that information
Okay.
through the utility billing
Okay.
program, yeah.
It's just that we're not, hopefully we don't spend that $16,000.
Right, right. Okay.
Good, thank you.
Yep. Sewer, they've got some minor increases, as Todd said, they don't have any gas expense. Their sample analysis did have to go up to 15%, like I said, with water. On to page 49. They did lower their repair and maintenance for infrastructure. This year, they did a lot of work, so we were able to get a lot done there. The bottom one, that's the other 6,000 for a third of the 2 copiers for the office. Yeah.
We didn't lower that amount. The reason the amount was high before was because there was some work that carried over from the previous year.
I'm sorry.
We're not doing less, we just,
Page 50, the transfer out from sewer, that actually goes to the sewer sinking to pay for their debt payment. We are transferring out from Northside Sewer, that's another fund that we don't need to use anymore. The wastewater depreciation, top of 51, that's their UV bulbs, mower trailer that Todd kind of touched on yesterday. Then you've got the sewer sinking, which is their principal and interest payments. Then you have the self-insurance fund, 50,000, we're doing okay with the claims, so 50,000 for claims, and then you have the HSA benefit there. And cafeteria is an employee contribution that is paid in and paid out. That's it for expenditures.
Oh, I got it memorized.
Any questions on anything?
Angie, on the $50,000, that's what we were not going to, or we were going to reduce our levy by, right? Is that the fund you were talking about when we?
Yes, that is the fund, but that's not, this is for claims.
That's for, okay.
That's for claims, that's the over and above the buy down, that's the buy down.
Okay,
From the deductible to what our employees have for.
got it. It's the what?
We're partially self-funded or self-funded for insurance. So our well-mark says the family might have like a $12,000 deductible, but we buy it down for the employee to $9,000. So we have to reimburse them for claims through a third-party insurance.
Okay. I actually understand that.
Good. Anything else?
I guess it's an accounting question. You know, went through the receipts, income, revenues at 17 million and expenses at 19.6. Where does that reconcile itself?
So because we have the cash on hand right now.
Okay.
So the 2.5 million that Todd's doing in streets
Okay.
that he's just bidding is actually getting expended in next fiscal year.
Okay.
Yes,
All right,
but we already have the cash on hand.
good. That's what I was scratching my head on.
One more question, if I might.
Sir?
So, Angie, we didn't have much chance to talk about this today, but in terms of the inflation that we're seeing, what kind of impact did you see on we're finishing up the current year budget, and then for this new budget, what kind of cost factors have been included for cost increases or inflation? That was a question that Tom and I were talking about earlier today, and you and I didn't have much of a chance to talk about that, but I was going to see if maybe we can talk about that more on the recap. I might be catching you off guard, but.
No, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I think we're realizing it here after these numbers have kind of been finalized. I know, Todd was able to plan some things that are being increased because we got notification shortly before we went to print with this, but at some point we have to get it out to you. I was talking with Kristen today. She went to buy some supplies she's got to have, and they went up like $20, $30. and so she's shopping around, and it, you know, I mentioned the paper yesterday, but, I don't think were really any departments that went with a flat percentage inflation, so I really don't know where we're at.
I guess along that same line, I'll ask the question, let's assume that we guess wrong and inflation catches us short, what do we do?
Address it at that time. We may have to, rate, I don't know, it depends, I guess, where the inflation is hitting.
Okay.
Is it,
So you can cut, well, we'd have to cut
We may have
checks
to,
or do
yeah.
something. All right.
That's also like in the water and wastewater fund, if you'll recall the rate study, we didn't used to carry much of a cash balance, and we're starting to carry a better cash balance, which helps fund our CIP, but it will also help us in a scenario like this when inflation hits us. At least there'll be some backup there. As you recall, we're gonna start carrying a minimum of 6 months operating where we never used to, right?
Right.
So that helps us in those funds. Now, that doesn't help us in the general fund, but it does in the ones where we control our rates a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking last night about, you know, if I was a department head, how, you know, would I be thinking about inflation and how to apply that to an operational expense budget? And it might be difficult for me to do that. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of criteria that we can adopt overall in the budget, just to understand that we know that we've got X percentage of compensation in the operational side of things, because now there's two ways looking at cash, if you underdo it, or you can compensate on the budget side and then end up with cash because you overcompensated. So, but because we're in such a unique time of inflation, we haven't had inflation for a decade and a half. It's gone the other direction in many cases. But it is a real issue. And it is in private budgets, and so you got to assume it's got to be in our city budget as well. So I wish I had an answer to it. I wish I could sit there and say, well, it's 5% based upon this, that, or the other. But I would think there's something out there that could help us.
Well, and it's tough too, because if you're talking about inflation on goods or wage inflation, because those are going to be two different things, and then the goods are going to be, the inflation rates on certain goods are going to be different than others. So yeah, how do you get to a solid, there's no, I don't think, one solution for this, but it is something that I think we're going to have to address, because we're also going to run into a scenario where these inflationary pressures, especially from a staffing standpoint, are going to become issues that we have to deal with if we have to look at filling the spots that are vacated due to pay deficiencies or the difference in scale from one skilled position to another. And then we're kind of caught in the middle. Well, okay, if we can't hire someone for X dollars, which has been the nominal rate for this type of employment, well, now we have to raise it, you know, so 5%, 7%, 10%, what have you. Well, then we have to do it for everybody else, right? Well, no, you don't, but then we turn into a recipe for some possible indigestion, shall we say. A lot of me talking with no answers, I get that, but...
I mean, if you take an example of the pavilion's building, storage building, putting $25,000 towards that, and relate that to what Todd's been doing in relationship to adjusting estimates on pending projects, that $25,000 may only buy a $19,500 shed. And if they're really looking at a $25,000 shed, there's going to be a shortfall there. Just, you know, I'm exaggerating that, but I'm trying to make the point that that's where inflation's gonna show up in our budget, is that even in the CIP side, it's gonna show up in our budget. And it could turn into some real dollars when you put it all together. And, so, that's why we're having these meetings, is to talk about stuff like this, so.
So on the, at least in my departments, Tom, on the capital side of things, if it's a CIP thing, we probably got a quote for something back in, August, September, all right? Because, you know, most of our department heads have to turn in these things to me by November, because I have to turn them in to Sam and Angie by December, because you guys have to have it by January, so it starts
Right.
months ago. But we typically add a percentage, and what percentage we add might depend upon what we're buying. And then we also understand that if we undercut ourselves on that CIP, we end up having to cut something out of the party, and we bring it back to you the next year.
Right.
At least on the capital side. Now, operations, you just do our best estimate based on historical,
Right.
you know, past amounts.
I guess that's why I look at a budget, it's a plan, it's a projection based on history and some forecasting for the future. But it's still a budget, it's a guideline, it's not a hard and fast, rigid figure that you're gonna have to meet every time. And like, if you come up short, you know, the shed for the pavilion, for example, if $25,000 isn't gonna do what they really need, they either roll it over or they shift something over. I mean, that's always the nature of budgets in my mind. It's a moving thing. It's not what we say today is gonna happen 6 months from now, or 18 months from now, technically.
Certainly wouldn't argue that, it's just that today's environment,
Right,
you know,
but how do you?
for the past decade and a half, we haven't really had to deal with it.
I know.
Well, how did you handle that one like this year? I was thinking, budget, like gas. In this last year's budget, look what gas was. And I know that's just a small item, but you had to do some adjusting with that, didn't you? For all your vehicles?
Yeah, whether it's mine or whether it's the PD's or whatever, of course we did some, but we don't know what the gas price is gonna be 18 months from
Yeah,
today. So
that's what I'm
you
saying.
put in your best estimate based on your gallons you use in a year, you put in a price, you go, I probably haven't adjusted some of our snow removal line items in I don't know how many years, because some years we get how many inches, 50 inches of snow, and the next year we get 17. Fuel might be $4, it might be $2.50.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough to do that on a commodity like that, but, you know, some of the more standard hard goods and operations stuff, I think we need to make sure that we are keeping an eye on that and coming up with a plan to address that. And I get what you're saying, Greg. It is, that we're not, it's not a hard and fast rule, but we just have to make sure that everything makes sense, and I think that starts with our people. So.
You're saying maybe we should figure on having a reserve, an extra reserve?
I don't know
Or is that
if it's a
possible in the city?
reserve necessarily, but it's understanding that before we get this ink to dry on this paper, that we understand exactly that we have avenues for dealing with these possibilities and probabilities that may happen.
And I think we have that, and you mentioned the 6-month reserve, and then capital improvements. Some of them may get kicked down the road. I mean, how often don't capital improvements get kicked down the road for a while,
Right.
a ways?
Yeah, 100% correct. And I guess I look at it as an employer. The cost of employee retention. Tom and I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. Is less than, in most cases, less than what it takes to go out and buy someone, or to find someone new, to get them at a rate that we deem is okay. So I think that I would be comfortable, or I would be more comfortable looking at things on the employee side a little bit deeper to make sure that we don't have to deal with major, that our employees, the heart of our of our city are not dealing with these inflationary pressures that we're trying to skirt around.
If I might. So if you'd go to briefly go to the city manager's report, and at the very end of department presentations, and you'll see the chart there on cash balances. So the League of Cities recommends 17% for a cash balance, which as a percentage of your expenditures, and we're coming in at, well, a lot of western Iowa cities are a little bit more conservative, and they have 10%. So 10% was the mark that we aim for, and we're at 8.43, and we're able to do that with a very slight levy drop. Now, I don't want to overstate the levy drop because assessments have gone up, but we've also released a lot of TIF, and so that's been, and you also have growth. So, you have growth in your tax base when you have a new building that's built, for example, like at 1023 Garfield. In South Dakota, when I was out there, it was like you have your CPI, which was your cities in South Dakota allowed 3% or the CPI, whichever is less. Plus, they can have all of the growth. Well, Iowa doesn't do it that way. It's all mixed together as part of the max levy resolution. So, one of the things that, Brad, if you don't mind, you and I were talking about earlier today was regarding the levy drop for employee benefits. And, the question was, well, should we really do that? Because we don't know what's going to happen there. We have a bit of a cushion there, but we don't want to be in the situation that we were in a number of years ago, where that well was fairly dry. Now it's healthy again. So are we adjusting the levy down there at the expense of next year?
Right.
Well, that's difficult to know. But I will tell you this, is that, and Kristen and I really believe we can and have justified this new employee. We're not going to proceed with the hiring until we need to continue to reevaluate the landscape, because if we need to shift gears and adjust to address needs for our existing employees, that comes first. And then we may have to do, for example, a part-time employee for her, and an intern for me that would be down at the end of the hallway, like $10,000 out of lost, and then you'll just have to back me up the rest of the year when, if I'm not as active in code enforcement as what people are calling for. Because right now I'm pretty active in code enforcement because I'm trying to be responsive to concerns that are raised. So, Brad, would you mind if we talked briefly about what you mentioned to me today on the
No, that's
on the
fine.
levy?
No, that's fine.
Do you have anything to add to what I said?
No, just other than, with the ongoing expenses and continually taking them out of lost, is shuffling it, back and leaving the levy where it's at. It's not a big percentage to go back up, but, health insurance, employee benefits, those things aren't going down. They're going to continue to go up. And I trouble seeing that part of the levy go down when we know it's going to go up next year, and we're going to have to raise it again. So why not just leave it where we're at? That's kind of my thoughts on it. We continue to take money from other funds to pay for those things, and why not use what's entitled to be in employee benefits, use what it's designed to do.
What is the percentage drop of the proposed levy as far as that particular line item goes?
So the employee benefits levy is actually
because it was 5.37761, and then it went down to 5.12922.
But because our debt levy has increased, our overall levy total has only decreased by 2 cents.
Sure.
Yeah.
Get a percentage on that. Oh, usually you're my calculator. So, 5731 is, I think, what you said?
The levy, the employee benefits one?
Yeah.
5.37.
And then down to,
5.13 rounding.
all right, so that is a drop of about 5%, which if we're talking about inflation at 6, kind of makes sense to keep it. Keep the levy, the employee levy the same as opposed to dropping it. If we're going to talk about maintaining the benefits for our current employees.
I mean, that's just a thought I had this overnight, thinking about everybody's wants and needs and employees, and I don't know how we can do it without keeping it the same.
So in terms, I mean, we throw these percentages, 5% and 5.1 and whatever, in terms of actual dollars, what kind of, I mean, in terms, and how that affects the taxpayer. I don't think, what would be the amount on the 100, say, take a $100,000 home, your taxes are gonna be down. If we put that drop in, it would be this much, we leave it the same. You know, I'm guessing we're talking less than $50. And that's just my gut feeling, that's not any figure in our calculator. Is there a way to figure that?
I did not, not
this
time.
Either way, if it's a 25-cent soft, right?
So,
So if it's 25 cents per 100,000, it's gonna be 25 bucks per 100,000 of value,
Yeah.
correct?
because yeah, it would put it at
Before
15,
rollback.
Before the rollback.
15.248 would be if we kept that, the employee benefits levy to where it's at right now. So that would, you're exactly right, it would be a quarter.
Times,
You know, we can-
times .56, which is your residential rollback.
Oh, sure, so
So the
15-ish cents, 12 and a half, whatever.
In terms of that, we're really not talking about, I mean, so we can say we had a cutback, we cut taxes. Well, is it really gonna mean that much at the end of the day when you're paying your tax bill to the Joe taxpayer? 25 bucks is,
Well, I don't want to trivialize that because, you know, they're hit with the other side of the increased,
I know.
increased assessment, so it becomes a harder pill to swallow when you say, well, it really is not that bad, but it is for the actual end user because of the increased assessment part. But I am in agreement with you that if this is something that we're going to do and it will save us money in the long run in the terms of retention, then I think it makes sense.
exactly. I mean, we're concerned about inflation. And that, you know, that, what are we gonna do, and how do we plan for that? Well, this would be one way to do it, just leave it in there, and that's one other step we've taken to try and cover our tail end.
Just to clarify, and Sam and Angie, please correct me if I'm wrong, The employee benefit levy does not pay wages. The employee benefit levy covers insurance costs.
Well, and that's exactly right, but, when we were having that conversation about employee benefits and what was going to happen if we do augment those, in which we did when we switched over to HSA, we talked about the impact and how, it was a force for growth. It was a force for employment. It was something that people looked at as a benefit that would, have them choose this job over another. So if we can't give them, if it's maybe not in the budget to keep up with wage inflation, if we can at least counteract that a little bit with the benefit side, there is still the benefit to the employee, the full-time employee anyway.
I just wanted to make sure we understood what it was paying.
Mm-hmm.
Can we move on? I mean,
I think at some point we'll need some direction on that issue. So,
direction I'm hearing is leave it the same. Anybody disagree with that? Rather than
Well,
drop
okay,
it a little bit?
is there a particular part in this session where we do that, or is this just kind of,
well, I think by consensus is fine. I mean,
Okay.
And then we can recap it, next week or whenever it comes back. So what I'm hearing is to keep it at, the 5.37761.
yes, that would be my inclination.
This year,
Looking around the
I
people
agree with that.
the bench here, I think everybody's kind of thinking, let's do that. There's your direction.
Good direction.
That's why you're the traffic cop.
Actually, Angie is.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we at? Emergency depreciation, have we covered that? Transfers. Okay, yes. And who's doing that? You? Okay, go ahead.
All right, so here you have two different worksheets for the transfers. One's transfers in, one's transfers out. Kind of just explains the money that's going into the general fund, where it's coming from, what it's for, and so on and so forth. Here is where you will see some of the combining of the funds that we talked about. That's more on probably the transfer out sheet, which is the second sheet. Shows all the capital projects, and I went with the balance that they are right now. They may continue to grow with interest and things like that. We can address that with the amendment. But where it's going into, like we said, a lot of it's going into the water improvement to help with the Lewis and Clark and start building balances there, some wastewater depreciation, the aquatic center, the TIP LHAP, things like that. Questions on those?
Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, emergency depreciation. So this has, this is wrong. I realized I don't even have the ambulance coming out of here, so I'm sorry. So we gotta take that out of there, $220,000. But with fire and, police being able to support their own items out of the general fund, that's gonna help the, ambulance depreciation fund only to support the ambulance, capital projects that they have. Any questions there? I'll update that and bring that back.
What's the new balance after what you took out, you forgot to take out?
190,130. All right. Any questions on that then? Now, go
How does that play into our previous discussion? I mean, that taking that out of there, were we using that number, that estimated cash balance? That 410,000, or had you?
No.
You had it, just didn't show up here. You had figured it accordingly.
No, the 410, you need to take the 220 out of that. That's what
Right.
brings you to that. The what?
I think what he's asking is, when you made your calculations on other stuff that based with that number, was that 220 out?
In the expenditures, the ambulance is in there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
I just missed it on the Excel sheet.
very good.
Sorry. Okay, local option sales tax. Todd, Sam, and I spent quite a deal of time on this little baby here.
Quality time.
Good time. We do have in here to replace one police vehicle, $250,000 to the Lewiston Park expansion project, the recycle bin. We by by the vote of the people, we are required to use some of this for property tax relief. So that is our casualty and property insurance comes out of loss, as well as we transfer money from here to the employee benefits to buy down, to lower that levy. We have, let's see, some transfers back to the general fund to help with that fund. We have the police item, capital items, and fire capital items being transferred to cover their expenses, and half of the additional full-time employee, as well as some of the capital projects for ambulance depreciation. Then on the right-hand side, you'll see some other requests that we've received from departments within the city, entities outside of the city, that you may or may not have to make decisions on. But as you can see, the ending cash balance on the left-hand side, the $184,923, includes all those in that column. On the right-hand side, the $30,873 is the estimated balance with the requests that are listed above. Questions, comments? The 275,000, yes, there's a 275,000 that Sam told me to bold, so that you knew you could not spend it. Because we may need that for the USDA grant match.
Is this, I didn't look at last year, is this fairly normal?
Last year, we spent it, or in the current year, we had planned to spend it down, I want to say, to about $30,000.
Okay.
But we hadn't touched any of the investments. With this, it does have us taking $52,000 from our investment.
Okay.
And that 52,000, that's just kind of, is that on the, is that allocated for the items on the right side of the column, or that table, or is that just, it's going to come off the top?
It was just a random number to bring us down to 275,000.
Gotcha.
And leave us with a balance in the cash fund.
Okay.
If I might. Last year, when we were coming into the budget, the estimate was a balance of $10,508. That was coming into the budget workshops last time.
We wanted to improve upon that at that time.
And then, so now that puts us at 30,873.
And that was, last year was also separating out those reserve funds.
Well, last year, we had a $327,000 projection for the investments, and we left that alone. So,
Gotcha. Anything else from you on lost? Any other questions? Or you want to move on?
Any direction, or do you want to come back to it?
I think we should have a discussion on turf at some point.
Yeah, we should go
We
over
ha-
the
I have-
request.
And we also have the other, the other requests, and we have some people here to present on that. So maybe what we want to do is we could either talk about turf and, go down that list now, then hit hotel motel tax, or come back to those two items after you hear the other requests. It doesn't really make a difference. You're addressing it either way.
Mhm.
You have a preference of it? I just soon deal with all the requests in one shot.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. We'll have that discussion with the request portion of our agenda. So, all right, next.
Right. Then on the agenda is hotel motel tax, and I think that's Sam.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So for the first time, we have a standalone agenda item on the budget for hotel motel tax. What I have here is the ballot language linked from 2015, Angie's notes from 16-17 budget session, which is the last time that was those percentages were reviewed, and then the draft resolution that I would bring forward, and then the recent marketing committee worksheet. So it appears at this point that the pavilion and parks are both requesting to keep their 2/7 and 1/7. So that you do have the opportunity to change that if you would like. And then I'll be bringing forward a resolution. You can see in the highlights there what the percentages are that need to be determined, and this resolution will be ongoing. So that's just a draft. All I have.
Okay. Any questions regarding that from anyone, or comments?
So, Sam, waiting for the draft to open here, but there are the various asks, the whatever 1/7 or whatever the deal was for Pavilion and for SCDC. So how does that work? Just give me a brief overview on the infrastructure as far as the marketing committee and how that interacts with hotel motel tax, and what say we as the governing body have over that just in general.
Well, you have oversight in two main ways. The first is now with determining where each of the 7 pieces of the 7 pennies go. So currently you have 4/7 that's being delegated completely to the marketing committee, and the marketing committee serves under SCDC, which has 2 city council members on it. There has been discussion within SCDC on having another council member, one that is not on the SCDC committee, serve on the marketing committee. So that, yeah, as a voting member, and then you also have access to the reports that come out of the committee, and ultimately, this is a local option sales tax. So there are cities who do not delegate it and decide how to spend all of the funds at either at budget time or when you have the requests come through individually.
So the idea is that this marketing committee made up of people in the business industry that are putting their collective heads together to figure out how best to use these dollars to basically market Sheldon, right? Is that essentially what it is? I guess the reason why I ask that, we get a couple of different, I've had members of the marketing committee come up to me and say, well, if the city council is just going to dictate what we do, why have us? If we're going to have city council members that are going to be voting members, that takes away from, the quote-unquote spirit of what the marketing committee is there to do. Now, I'm not advocating for or against that necessarily. I'm just more trying to get an understanding of what the, what the true spirit of what we're trying to do with these dollars is, and making sure that it's being spent in the best way. Now, I don't have anyone from the marketing committee here, it looks like, so. Oh. Peter, would you care to share some thoughts on this?
This has been a hot potato.
Please come to the microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
And while I get to the microphone, let me say this has been a hot potato. The marketing committee basically decides from the requests of people of the community who has enough purpose in mind to serve the growth of our community through tourism, and who is just asking for dollars because they need dollars. If our committee is not doing that, then it would fall to you as the city council to do that. And not quite often, sometimes we have to make a decision that this particular request coming to us is not one that would be beneficial to the majority of the citizens of Sheldon, and we have to deny that request. And I think probably the reason that we exist is to protect you from having them catch you on the street and say, well, why in the world didn't we get that money? And of the annual budget that we have right now, we're giving $30,000 of it, actually $20,000 this year, but we're adding another 10, so $30,000 of it to the celebration days. We're giving, is it 10 or 20? You've got the sheet there in front of me. You're catching me off. I didn't plan to speak on this topic. To Rise Fest, and then we're also giving to the village's annual 3rd of July celebration. And if you stop to think about those, bing, 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 they're probably the 3 greatest events that bring people to the city of Sheldon during any one particular year. And in the process of doing that, then we also have money going towards the schoolhouse project. We have money going towards the situation where we bring in the artist series every year that's at the high school. So the money is greatly at this point, with the reserve funds that we used, and we used our reserve funds to cover our indebtedness to the new pavilion. So we're now kind of working on next week's paycheck to pay this week's bills. So we don't have a lot of extra money right now, but I can assure you that as I've sat in that committee for the last 5 or 6 years, we've tried very diligently to be very conservative about the spending and to make sure that it is only invested in the places that it's best for the total community. And that's one of the reasons why we jumped as heavily. We've never made donations to the level of the pavilion before, but can you tell me something that's more beneficial to our future than that particular facility? We had our Chamber of Commerce meeting out there a week ago, and the gentleman that came from Missouri to speak to us, that's the first thing he talked about. I can't believe a town this size would have a facility of this nature, and it's rented every single weekend for the next year, almost the next 2 years right now. So I think that's been a good investment, but it's one that's for the community, because Sam will tell you, and I'll tell you, it'll never really pay for itself, but it brings money in for hotels. We got a potential of another hotel coming to town, for our restaurants, for our bars, for so many different, the gasoline stations, whatever. So that helps us in taxation too. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
If I remember the figure, it was 166,000 projected for hotel motel tax revenues. Is that correct? There's a lot of figures going in my head right now, so I want to...
So we are anticipating 166,000 in hotel motel tax. If it stayed at 4/7 to the marketing committee, they would get 94,620,
Okay,
assuming we receive the 166.
yes. So, and last year we budgeted 150, I think. We didn't get that, so I mean, that explains why you're waiting for next week's paycheck, perhaps. But based on, and again, this is all this forecasting and budgeting, and based on the last couple of months, the direction that hotel motel revenues are going is up, assuming they do get 166,000 in this coming year. That 94,000 goes a long ways, bringing you back flush and beyond, I guess, for next year. And so, I don't know what the right answer is, but it appears that brighter days are coming in terms of your tourism.
Mayor, I was just going to say really quickly, first of all, thanks, Peter, for the comments. The marketing committee just got through the budgeting process, and COVID and stuff like that, we're still a little bit skeptical on the budgeting. You know, we're budgeting 166 to come in, 94,000 coming to SCDC marketing. So they're budgeting about $72,000 for this upcoming year, just to be conservative. We certainly hope that it comes in over that. Don't want to overcommit yourself either, just based on the unknown of the pandemic. So positive light is this last quarter check, and Angie and I talked about this too, was second highest quarter in history of collecting hotel tax. History, still within a pandemic. And the highest record on quarter was 2019, prior to the pandemic. Continuing to do this, which is great. We did this because of the pandemic, but now we're leveling out and coming back. So I certainly think that's a great sign. Hope that trend continues. We just don't know. We're just dealing with the pandemic here just a little bit. So marketing committee, my point to you is the marketing committee is being a little bit more conservative this year, just in light of the unknown.
But therein lies the challenge of setting a budget.
Right.
The only other thing I'll say is that, you know, Iowa code dictates how that money can be spent. I mean, they're really working underneath the umbrella a little bit on how that's directed. So based on how other third that is being directed out of the hotel motel tax, but that's got to fall in line in the Iowa code language too, which it does. But understand, you just can't spend it anywhere. It's got to fall in line with what
Right.
Right. My personal opinion is the structure of the marketing committee and how it's funded, and to the degree it's funded, is fine. I think we have crossed the bridge, which is part of the hot potato that Peter mentioned when it comes to a little more oversight. But I think we're there now, and I think that having 1 out of 11 to do that is reasonable. So from that perspective, I think I don't have any problem with the budget of the marketing committee, or what they do, or how well they do it. What I think that this has gotten thrown in the middle of us is the turf project, and there was a recommendation that maybe we would roll over the 20,000 that normally was being given to the pavilion by this committee to help fund the turf, and that kind of got everything rolling. So I think now, you know, the turf would have been nice to have the marketing committee deal with, because then we wouldn't have to, just like Peter said. But we do. We have to deal with it. So I think we get past the marketing committee discussion from my perspective and put in place the, the new structure of the oversight, and let's move on to the discussion of turf.
So you're saying you want to have that discussion now, or have that discussion as like we planned earlier, for the other requests?
We can do it with the other requests, doesn't matter to me, but bottom line is we're gonna have to have the discussion, like Sam said. So
We'll let that simmer and deal with it like we planned when we get to that point. All right. Anything else, Sam, you need to comment on there?
No.
We move on then to estimated balances. Is that you?
Sure. I mean, I think the estimated balances pretty much speak for themselves. If it shows that there's a negative cash balance, their investments, which are listed in the middle column, would cover that. Need to know if you have any questions for me or Todd or Sam?
Is there any in here that would give you cause for concern? These balances, estimated balances? Or is this pretty much typical year, typical budget?
I think it's pretty typical, except for, some of the money that we've moved around from the capital fund to help out some of our other funds that are going to be in need of money in the future for a different project.
Mm-hmm. But that's kind of standard procedure too, isn't it? As your capital improvements shift around and department to department?
Well, not really. We're gonna get rid of a couple of those capital fund projects.
Oh.
The Skemper, the Trilogy, the Sunshine, and move those because they're funds that haven't been used in years. I don't think there's any lots for sale in Sunshine. I think there's one lot. No, I don't think there's Skemper. There might be one in Trilogy. So what we've discussed is actually just creating a capital project fund where all lot sales, whether it's Sheldon Crossing, whether it's Floyd, whether it's Skemper, and just put those lot sales in there.
Bucket. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the consolidation. I really do.
Yes.
It's hard enough to keep up with it all, and have little pots everywhere, let me tell you.
Anything else anybody has on that? Otherwise, we'll move on to TIF. And who's handling that?
Want me to go through?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright. So with TIF, you of course have your debt payments. Those get transferred to debt service because they're paid from debt service. You'll see SCDC's request for their allocation, their storefront program, the rides, the Children's World. There is money for blight remediation that Sam does, consultant and professional fees. That's attorney fees that we use if we have to bond, if we have to update urban renewal or even urban revitalization, or we update the urban renewal plan. We transfer a portion of the interest to the general fund. Balance to Bethel, we have part of that coming out in this fiscal year and part in the next. Exercising land option at Crossroads, that would be option number 2. The residential land purchase annual payment to SCDC, future street projects, the airport project, and the Southside Sewer Study. So I think I gotta turn that over to Sam for some of those items.
Care to elaborate on any of those, Sam?
Yeah, I'll start at the
Go fast.
Or rotate. Why is it doing this?
We're working on it over here. We're working on an IT solution.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna start at the bottom and work up because I think that we'll have some discussion on the exercising the land options. So, the South Side Sewer Study, that is allowable under our urban renewal plan, helps us plan for growth, and most of the, if not all of the south side of town is in urban renewal, so that is an allowable expense. Allows us to plan for lift stations and the like. Anything you want to add to that? Okay.
No, I think I touched on it yesterday.
Airport, remember a few years ago, there was a request from the airport at my recommendation. We talked about it at airport board meetings that Tom was at too, about asking the city council for $20,000 in grant match funds from local option sales tax. Remember that discussion? And then did some further research and discovered the two original airport parcels are in urban renewal and have been since 1994. We hadn't tapped into that, and that has been a real blessing because instead of a $20,000 grant match, we can fund a lot of important improvements to the tune of $253,900 out of there, and that really alleviates strain on the general fund and helps the airport. Future street infrastructure projects, $400,000. This is a set aside, and so Todd and I are working with. We'll be working with Ehlers when we update our urban renewal plan this year. It will not be the exhaustive boil the ocean urban renewal update that we did last year, which was a lot of work. We updated the urban renewal plan and the urban renewal area. We're looking at updating the urban renewal plan this time for just a couple of things, and that would be for the water tower and for some street improvements. In one of the memos, I have a list of some of those street improvements, and we originally had talked about, Todd and I had talked about asking for a $4.1 million bond issue and then doing more streets. We are now recommending 3.1 instead. Because, as I mentioned yesterday, we'd rather not carry so much cash, and we also have a lot of work that we're already working on. So that 400,000 is a set aside, so it could be viewed as cushion, but also be viewed as setting aside for future street endeavors. We believe we can also use it for things like chip sealing, crack sealing, and repairs, like for example that big pothole out by Prairie Trail and what's the cross street, Larkspur, so things like that. Residential land purchase, annual payment SCDC, that's a filler. We don't have anything currently that is destined to go to, but that is a possibility down the road. Because as was discussed by the Housing Task Force, there is a need for land acquisition, and that would be one way to do it. So we wanted to have a placeholder there. Now, let's have a conversation about exercising the land options at Crossroads. So Kurt, you're gonna have to help me out with this one, but I do recommend that we strongly consider this. It is an allowable expense out of urban renewal funds. We believe that we can do it with TIF cash. The options for the, how many acres is it?
It's about just over 38 acres for option
About 38 acres north of 18 and directly east of Co-op. So that would be the next area that we would want to look at. Those options go up in price next year. I think it's a good idea to exercise the option, or at least strongly consider it. But you also have to remember that I'm the son of a Sioux County farmer, so when you see an opportunity to buy land, why not do it before the price goes up, especially if you know it's something that's part of your comprehensive plan that you want. Go ahead.
Just to say something real quick. Yeah, so I think the idea behind this isn't to buy it and develop it. I think the idea behind it is to get it locked in at an option price that we negotiated with the initial acquisition with transfer. So it's a 15-year option with 5-year escalators built in. The first of the 5 years expires on January 1 of 2023. So really a year from now, not quite. We'd have really 2022 to negotiate or work with Crossroads to exercise that option, primarily to the east of where we currently own, right along Highway 18. Price difference, we can acquire that ground based on the current option of $32,000 an acre. If you remember, when we bought that ground originally, it was $35,000 when we negotiated that ground. So this would be a $32,000 per acre acquisition cost. If we don't exercise it, which we don't, then we move into that next tier of the next 5-year window, and then that option price jumps up to $35,000 per acre between January 1, or excuse me, if you exercise it after January 1 of 2023 or before January 1 of 2028. So really got another 5 years to work on that $35,000 per acre acquisition price. To let that go, and then anytime after January 1 of 2028, the option price jumps from $35,000 to $38,000 per acre. And then the option would be null and void on January 2 of 2033, which would be the sunset on the 15-year option. So the reason that we're bringing it to you today is seriously just for your consideration. We're not looking to buy it, develop it. We got Crossroads North Phase 2 that we're just finishing up, that we have adequate commercial development ground out there. This is just providing you an opportunity to do your due diligence on the option prices that were in good faith negotiated in a business deal for the city. An option to lock in that per acre price at $32,000 right now if we want to. Like Sam says, he thinks it's a good deal. I would tend to agree. As opposed to waiting and then buy yourself another 5 years, but the per acre price will go from $32,000 to $35,000. Just something for consideration.
So all these price options that you just outlined are all on the same 30 acres or 31 acres?
Correct. So there's two options. There's the 35 acres directly east of where Co-op and Jimmy John's is,
Right.
along Highway 18.
Right.
And then there's another 38 acres directly to the north, along Highway 60.
And are both available at any time?
Both are available, and either option can be executed in no particular order. So if we want to go north, we could do that. Or if we want to go east, I think it's our recommendation, the development committee standpoint and staff would be going east, the highway frontage.
But it's only those two lot sizes, or allotment sizes?
Correct.
Can't purchase a portion of the first allotment, okay.
This would be a land swap. This wouldn't be a cash outlay. If you remember that we acquired the grants or ground initially, they identified ground to swap with us. So makes things a little bit trickier. Land swaps, but we did it once, we'll figure out a way.
Sam, you made the comment, we believe we can use funding, as you're talking about. That's just based on your opinion, or have you gone higher than that? I mean, how confident are you that that can be done?
Very, because it's in the urban renewal plan, and we've used that same section to buy a commercial industrial ground before.
Okay. So it's not just grasping at straws, we think it's going to work, but it did.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, the only question is the logistics of it. Do you go through the effort of another short-term bond, or can you do a simple resolution for advancement of cost where you pay for it briefly from another fund and then reimburse from this fund? And that's something that I would work out, we would work out. But I'm confident that we could do this, and I'm also laying the groundwork, or Kurt and I are, for next year if we can swing the next option. At that point, the pressure isn't as great, because that will then, the north 38 acres will be locked in for 5 years at the higher price.
And just dollars and cents, just so you're aware, I mean, if you wait, what's the cost of that? whether you exercise it this year or wait for the escalator to 35, it's about $114,000. Whether you execute it now or wait the next 5 years.
That's specifically on that one parcel?
Either one. One,
So they're even in size?
pretty much, they're very, very close.
38
Yep.
versus 35. Did you calculate on 38 acres or in 35?
The numbers I'm using here, the 114 is based on 38.
Okay, because I came up with
We have to-
105,
yeah.
but I was using that 35 acre
Yeah.
plot, so there's our difference.
A little bit different. We'd have to dial in the numbers just a little bit.
Yeah.
But as far as estimated is concerned, based on what Sam has here in the tip sheet, and what I just gave you, the 114, talking really ballpark figures.
110, give or take, $5,000.
115,
basically.
yep.
Yeah, okay.
If I might?
Yep.
It's all right if I introduce Scott Stevenson at this point to talk about bonding,
Sure.
and then we can circle back if there's anything else on TIF.
He's been waiting, it looks like. He's ready to go. Come on.
Enjoying the dialogue here. What are you talking about? So I invited, so this is Scott Stevenson from D.A. Davidson, and I've had the privilege to work with him for several years here, and then also several years in my prior life, and so we really appreciate the numbers that he has put together. I have asked him to do a couple of things. One is to go through our general debt capacity, and then to talk about our future debt capability, including Western Avenue and maybe other opportunities as they arise that may currently at this moment be unknown, and then specifically to talk about $3.1 million for our water tower, and then also to talk about the interest rate environment in general and the bonding environment. So the floor is yours.
Sure, great. Thanks for the introduction, Sam. Happy to be here.
I'm gonna try
Try to keep this short and sweet. I know you guys have a lot to get through, but first I just want to talk about the city's debt capacity. So I'm going to talk about this on a forward-looking basis. You're working on your budget for 22-23. So one very fortunate result from the valuations that came out for January 1 of 2020, which are applicable, or excuse me, January 1, 21, applicable for 22-23. The budget year that you're working on is you experienced a nice valuation growth. You guys all know that. That directly correlates to calculating the city's overall debt limit. So that increase in valuation led to a $2.4 million growth in your top line debt limit. So obviously you have your top line debt limit, which you then subtract your existing debt from, and that leaves you with what you have available to work off of. So between that and the defeasance of the community center debt, the city is certainly in a very favorable position in terms of what you have for available debt capacity on a go-forward basis. So Sam alluded to when you're talking about or thinking about things like a land acquisition, which sounds like you've got cash resources for, but the water tower project, other street projects, you know, those are typically financed using your general obligation debt limit, whether that's payable from a debt service levy or TIF, kind of applies the same way. So really taking a long way around here of telling you kind of where you stand at the current moment. Currently you've got about, looks like $9 million in existing debt against that $20-ish million debt limit that you have. So you're currently just under utilizing half of what your existing debt limit would be.
Could you move the mic just a little closer?
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Is that better?
Yeah.
Good. You know, when you apply a $3.1 million bond for the water tower project, it's just a hypothetical. Obviously, that doesn't exist today and hasn't necessarily been committed to, but if you were to do so, that would take your available legal debt capacity after incorporating that still to what I would characterize as fairly comfortable $7.4 million or 38% of existing debt limit. So, you know, it's pretty common for cities to try to stay at or below 80% of their debt limit profile. So I guess, you know, what I'm getting at here is even incorporating in a $3.1 million bond for the water tower project leaves you in a very comfortable position should you decide to take on another project, even in the upcoming fiscal year, albeit that's unlikely. But on a go-forward basis, you know, you're going to experience continued valuation growth as well as roll-off or amortization of your existing debt, which will free up additional capacity in future years. But just looking snapshot in time, FY 22-23, which is what you're really focused on right now today, certainly in a very good position, both in terms of where you're at now, as well as in terms of addressing what you're contemplating for borrowing needs in the upcoming fiscal year. Questions on that? So just quick pivot then, talk about interest rates a little bit. Last year, rates were at all-time lows. We have bounced off that a bit as we've moved forward into 2022. Rates have trended upwards since January 1 in a fairly steady fashion. That obviously has a direct impact on municipal bond rates. All those interest rate markets are all interconnected, as you would imagine. When we issued just last year for the fire truck and streets, that borrowing cost was really close to what I've seen in terms of my 15-year career as being some of the lowest cost of debt that we've been able to finance for any city. We're probably up 50 to 75 basis points from that, and I think currently the trend or the watch point that everyone's concerned with is inflation. Obviously, that's been a subject you guys have been deliberating more from the cost standpoint in terms of your operating budget, but that will ultimately, generally speaking, flow through to the Federal Reserve taking some action, raising interest rates as a way to combat ongoing inflationary pressures that the economy is experiencing. So I think the theme going into 2022 is that there's certainly an expectation of having higher interest rates. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I'm not a forecaster necessarily or an economist, but we've seen a trend towards higher rates. Federal Reserve met today and sort of expressed an ongoing concern that inflation has been a pressure that they're going to try to deal with in 2022, and the way they'll deal with that is going to be higher rates most likely. So just want to put that out there for consideration, that I would expect interest cost to be a little bit higher than it has been historically for the borrowings the city's undertaken, although we're still in a very low interest rate environment, sub 2% for 10, 15-year kind of financing needs, but nonetheless higher than what we've experienced in recent history. Questions on that?
We're talking projecting inflation and all that. What are your projections? You're in the business.
Do I have to go on record?
Can you also give me the winning Powerball?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Yeah, so I think when we look at Fed action, or the Federal Reserve, typically they've taken an approach of saying they're going to do a lot more about inflation than what they actually do. Typically raising interest rates has a negative impact on the economy. Stock values, general economic indicators usually are depressed in an environment where we see rising interest rates. That's why we have low interest rates, or have had, is combating the recession associated with COVID. So seeing higher interest rates follow an inflationary period would be normal, except that there will be a lot of political pressure to keep interest rates low to prop up our economy and stock values and things associated with that. So I'm probably a little biased that I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as what everyone says or is pricing in at the current moment, but time will tell. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the tightrope that the interest rates are going to walk, is how much do we need to raise to combat inflation, knowing that that's going to have a stymieing effect on the economy, and how much of that can we stomach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You bet.
Anything else? Any questions?
How much more debt could we take on before we hit that 80% that kind of springing that on you? But can you help me with the calculation real quick?
Yeah, it's not too hard. So if you figure you have a $20 million debt limit, 80% of that would be 16 plus or minus. Right now, you're at, well, if we presume the city moves forward with 3.1 million for the water tower, you'd be at 12.5. So that leaves you about call it a $3.5 million gap between that 80% number and where you're at, presuming you move forward with a $3.1 million water tower. That would just be for FY 22-23. Again, moving forward from there, you're going to have valuation growth as well as amortization of the existing debt to free up further.
And then you have what's called the $5 million small issuer exception. Is that more of a legal term, or do you understand that one?
Yeah, so that more has to do with having to rebate funds to the IRS in the event you have earnings that exceed what your borrowing cost is. A little bit of a separate consideration from debt limit, but certainly can get into that too if you want, but I think that's a little bit more of a different consideration than what we're talking about as relates to your debt limit.
Anybody else questions for Scott?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming today, Scott. Good to see you again. All right. Anybody need a break? Okay, we're gonna take a 3-minute break. 4 minute, we'll give you 4. If you need the restroom or grab a snack, whatever, we're gonna take a 4-minute break, and then we'll get into the request. I didn't drink that. What's that? If I drink that one, I would need a break too.
Okay, well, you book it, and we'll split it.
We'll see. Are you happy you don't have to wear your mask?
Yeah, I can breathe, I can breathe. I can breathe much better,
Good,
and I feel better.
good,
My throat's clearing up.
good. Did you say that they put you on a steroid?
Yeah, last week. What?
Did you say that they put you on a steroid?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I only took 3 of them, and that,
Ooh.
I mean, I was
Wide awake.
bug-eyed, wide awake.
Oh my, that, they gave Sarah something too that they said would make her drowsy, and she couldn't do it.
Yeah, he said, if you got Benadryl, take some with it, so it makes you sleepy, because he said otherwise it'll bounce you off. It'll just make you wide awake. It didn't bounce me off the wall, but, I mean, I laid in, I was, the night before, I maybe slept for,
It's like
Yeah.
I went to bed, then I got coffee, and just,
Oh.
I finally went up and I sat in the recliner.
Watch TV?
Not even watch TV.
Oh.
And then about 3:30 in the morning, I had my radio on, and I heard Paul go out to a house fire, so I listened to their house fire first. So, I took 3 of them, and I said, I ain't taking any more.
Yeah.
And then, I think it was Friday night, I went to bed about 9 o'clock, and it was, I woke up at 20 after 7 to be working at 7:30.
Oh boy. Whoops.
Made it at 7:35.
It worked. It happened.
Yeah.
It worked.
But I mean, that was the best night I slept. Yeah, the steroids, it was
Oh, man. It just takes its toll on your body when you don't have that rest.
and if you can't sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just cancel out. That's just not.
I heard that 2 or 3 times. Yeah. And the next time I hit it,
Yeah, then just next time they have just hit the home button there, and then that'll get you back to the main screen and then go back into Safari.
I'd rather have the paper. Since Angie did such a nice job giving it to me.
I like the paper too, Ken.
I'm sorry, I get stuff on the computer and I print it off. I just rather read it on paper. I go to sleep reading the computer. I have literally fallen to sleep reading the computer screen. I'm old.
No one's arguing that, Ken.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
With any luck, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I know a couple of people that hope not.
Heard that.
No, I just came out of the store. Everything all happened at once. Now when I go home, I gotta go climb in my attic, move a sewer pipe. Electrician hit a vent pipe in the attic, putting in canned lights. We came out of the kitchen. We wanted to put in canned lights.
Oh, yeah.
They're nice. I got a combination.
Yeah.
Getting after it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did.
I noticed that when I got back to the office.
Try to park
Yeah.
up a little bit over there, please.
How round is
Speak up a little bit over there, please.
lift station? Is that like 10 foot diameter? Yeah, the tile. Out in Gorman?
Oh, you know, I think.
Well, that's,
I think, I haven't been down there since they delivered them.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, it's,
Here and had you.
it's,
Had you.
it's huge. It's huge.
Knew they were gonna deliver some stuff down there.
Yeah, there's about 3 or 4 big,
Structures came in,
yeah,
structures.
tile,
Yeah.
round tile.
I forget what the diameter is.
Yeah, they're huge.
A lot of times there's a tone, the pitch and the tone probably bothers it more than anything else.
Right.
I don't think they're gonna dig there.
And you have that
No,
tone.
well,
I've got that
Dig in
old drone. Yeah.
they had a big hole over there.
Well, they did. They must have.
All right, let's get back at it, people.
They must have changed their plan of attack.
Yeah, I think last couple days, the big tile came in. I noticed another one today.
I bet you they're gonna send the, well,
Our timer has gone. If you could take your seats, please. Yeah. 4 minutes goes awfully fast. Where's Sam?
In the kitchen.
All right.
Yes.
All right, we are on to item K, other requests. First one up for consideration is Northwest Iowa Regional Housing. Is there anyone here representing that organization today that would like to speak? Okay. How do you want to handle it? Individually? Yes,
Just
no?
go down the list. Yeah, Mid-Sioux is not here.
Anyone from Rides? NCC Wellness Center, you're, Greta, hi.
My turn. Well, I just wanted to be here to thank you for your support of the Lifelong Learning and Recreation Center. NCC, the LLRC, and all of us out there value this partnership, and we thank you for your support. And if there's any questions that I can answer, I feel like I've stood at this podium for many years, and I know all of you know the good work that we're doing out at the college and the good things we're doing out at the Lifelong Learning and Recreation Center. And I also know that you've been here for quite a while. So I won't waste your time, but should you have any questions about the rec center or the college, I'd be happy to answer.
I was surprised to see it's been 10 years already. It'll be 10 years here coming up.
It has been
It's
10
been here
years.
that long already. That's-
I'll celebrate my 11th anniversary as a college employee in the beginning of March. So yeah, thank you. That's a long-standing partnership,
It has.
and it's been wonderful for all 11 years.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me ask, as far as utilization, have you regained since COVID first started?
Yeah, we're seeing an increase. Last year to this year, currently we're up 7% in individuals with active memberships at the Recreation Center. So yes, we are finally seeing that return. Yeah, people are feeling more comfortable. Those that are comfortable getting vaccinated are. We still have people who are wearing masks and still getting their exercise out there. We're seeing an uptick in cases currently, but I think people are just more comfortable with the situation. And so yeah, we are seeing a return to the LLRC. Right now we're at 1,515 individual people who have active memberships to our facility. So lots of families. This is kind of my busy time of year. As you know, we've all made those New Year's resolutions. So yeah, I see some faces in the crowd and at the desks that walk past my window. So we're glad to be welcoming those folks back. Thanks, Tom.
Great, thanks. Glad to hear it.
Anyone else? All right, Greta, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
right, is there anyone here from the golf course? Okay. Upper Des Moines. Welcome. State your name for the record, if you would, please.
Hello, I'm Shakira Meyer. I'm the Director of Development Compliance and Reporting with Upper Des Moines Opportunity, and we just wanted to make sure we were here if you had any questions regarding our request. We appreciate the City of Sheldon and the investment that the city has made in addressing poverty for so many years, and as Upper Des Moines, we've been in the area since 1965, working to fight against poverty and invest in the communities. And as noted in our request, for the amount that the city invested previously, almost $100,000 came back into the city. That's in the form of many things, including assistance with utilities, food for residents, and many other pieces, and that goes right back into your city and your infrastructure. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
No questions, just thank you for the work you do, and we appreciate partnering with you on this.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep, thanks for coming, Shakira.
Thank you.
Ashley, SCDC, are you here for that? Me too. Oh, both of you. All right.
All right, so yeah, Peter and I are here on behalf of the Planning Committee for the 150-year anniversary. So as most of you know, it is Sheldon's 150th anniversary this year. So we are looking to ramp up our Celebration Days weekend by combining these celebrations together. And our goal is to just provide multiple opportunities for the community to come together and spend some time with food and fellowship, and just provide activities for all age ranges, as well as having events throughout the weekend that will note on Sheldon's history. So a contribution from the city would allow us to take some of these ideas that are being thrown around and make those reality and just give a good weekend for the community as a whole.
I was teaching my Bible class this morning, and I thought it was kind of appropriate because it was the 51st Psalm. And in that particular Psalm, David points out how important it is that we gather together, that we can't stand alone. We need to be a group and enjoy each other's relationship and each other's comfort and each other's joy. And I think what's happened on the planning for this 150th, and by the way, you're very fortunate because you won't be around for the 200th, so you won't have to worry about going through this again. But anyway, what we've been doing, and this committee has been meeting for about almost a year and a half now, is we've tried to figure out ways to bring individuals and neighborhoods and parts of the community together to celebrate the existence of us as a community. We talk about ourselves as being the city of Sheldon, but we're also the community of Sheldon. And so, for example, one of the things we're throwing around today was neighborhood meetings where 2 or 3 neighborhoods will get together, not during the celebration days, but before the celebration days, and have a chance to have a neighborhood picnic together. Or we're talking about having different events that start as early as May and run all the way through to the end of June. So this is not just a celebration days. This is a celebration of the community at every level that we possibly can, including all the people in the community we possibly can, to give us a chance to be proud of who we are and what we are, and proud of what you, as a council, have made this community to be. We've got many wonderful things, the walking trails and on and on and on. I'm not going to belittle that. But $15,000, after hearing you talk about all you've talked about, it almost seems like we're asking for you to squeeze the lemon one more time. But the fact of the matter is, we already have found the marketing committee willing to squeeze their lemon and come up with another 10, so we'll have $30,000 from them. We need at least $50,000 to pull this off. So that's the reason for it. It's not to make a bigger celebration days, but to make it more involved, and also to bring a lot of people from out of town into Sheldon for celebration days and our sesquicentennial. By the way, Sibley and Hall both also have sesquicentennials this year. So, any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. 50 years ago, I was around for the 100-year celebration. I was 11 years old, and I played a part in the citywide production out at the football stadium. I was the dunce in the classroom setting.
Do you still have that script?
do not.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because we just talked about that this morning, about taking that script, updating it, and redoing it again this 150-year anniversary. We didn't do anything, as you remember, for the 125th.
Yes, I know.
So
So
that was the first year that the review existed, 1972. So that was the beginning of my experience with reporting history in Sheldon, Iowa.
But anyway.
Other questions?
I missed it a year of moving here. I missed it, and everybody was talking about it, what they were. So now I'm gonna be around for the 150 at least.
Right.
Not the 200.
And as young as you are, you make the 200th too.
Well, I mean, I think you were around for the 100th.
But not here.
Right, you were still selling gospel albums out of your trunk, or your Model T.
But if you remember the 100th, and you do as a 7-year-old, the biggest thing you probably remember is the carnival down Main Street.
Yep.
And then we had the thing that you were part of, as you talked of, we had the beer growing contest. A lot of that will not be part of this one, because the emphasis on this one is going to be on the last 50 years. We celebrated our 100th anniversary. So the whole emphasis will be on things you will remember and be part of. Sharks, do you have any other questions?
No beards this year. No beards this year? No
Well, I'm not saying we won't, but we may require you to do it in a more Van Dyke style or something. Who knows?
Sam's got a comment or question.
Peter, Millie's columns are amazing. Everybody loves to read her columns on history. What are the chances of getting a book printed up of all of her
That will
columns
happen,
that she's
yes.
ever
I can guarantee you that that's in the works. We've compilated that material. The biggest problem we're going to have on it, Sam, truthfully, is editing it. Some of those columns are extremely long. If we put all of them in the book the way she's written them, it would have to be a book about the size of this. So, but yes, we are planning to do that.
Great.
Questions?
Just looking forward to it.
Yep. Thank you both for being here today.
So when do we get a response?
We'll get to that.
All right.
Right now, we're just hearing presentations. All right. Anyone here from CASA? CASA?
Stephanie's not able to make it.
Okay. Moving on, let's see. Children's World. I think you are here, yes. Please.
Hello, my name is Sawyer Wiesler, and I currently serve on the board of Children's World. I wanted to thank you guys for your investment into our child care center. We are priding ourselves in being good stewards of the taxpayer money and providing that service back to the taxpayers. Much like the folks before me, I'll keep it brief and just let you know that I'm here for any questions or anything. But I just wanted to let you know that we sincerely appreciate, like I said, the investment. It is an investment to our center, to our children, to our area workforce. I don't know that you could truly understand how much a difference that makes. So thank you very much for this partnership, and let me know if any questions.
Anyone?
Just, it's a good asset to have in the community. Our employees need it, citizens need it, and the employers need it. So I think Children's World does a good job.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, Sawyer, just one real quick question back here.
Yeah.
Just to give a focus on the demand of childcare locally, because it is a big demand and it's a crisis across the state of Iowa. What are you guys looking at as far as the waiting list right now? Yeah.
Sure. I don't have the exact numbers of the waiting list.
Estimate.
Yeah, I want to say, I think we're in the teens. Yeah, and again, don't quote me. I can get exact numbers for you if you'd like. We did just recently open up 2 new rooms, which is huge. So we're serving more toddlers and more 5-year-olds, and we're more babies. And it tends to be, once you have the young ones, they hopefully grow with you. So our numbers from a year ago today, we're up 9 in enrollment. So I know that doesn't seem tremendously huge, but those are 9 kids that have gotten to have care, and we have maintained our staff, which is pretty impressive in the child care world as well. So yeah, and then we have the potential to expand a little more, so we're looking forward to that.
I don't have a question, really, more a comment. The thing that surprised me most in your letter to me,
yeah,
the average cost of a child care for an infant in a child care center is $10,131
sure
annually.
Right.
And just for a little perspective, with a DHS registered center, one staff member can only be in charge of 4 babies. So it can be quite spendy to provide care to a lot of children because you need a lot of staff.
Does that cost go down as the toddler and preschool age?
It does a little bit because the ratio then, you know, as you have a 5-year-old, the care might be 10 to 1, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, expensive world.
Anyone else? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
OCEDC, is there anyone here from there? Okay. So that is the end of the presentations, unless I missed someone, I don't think so. All right. Recap. Did we discuss requests? Do you want to go into this discussion request now? We said we were going to discuss
Yeah, I think
along
while
all of these.
our minds are fresh, I think
Okay.
we should, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of go down the list real quick. So all of these are the same as last year except for 3. So the golf course is reduced. No, they went up. They were at 5. They were at 15,000 a few years ago, and then they went to 5, and now they're up to 7. And then we have the SCDC request, which is a new request, and the CASA request, which is double the funding that they received last year. So the rest of them are the same. So if maybe we could start, does anybody have any questions on the rest of them? Then let's drill down on the 3 that I just mentioned. Okay. So if it's all right, let's talk about the golf course request. They're not here tonight. If you have any questions, we may have to defer this one. Questions on that one?
Is there anyone from the golf course or aware what members or? Like I read through that and I'm a little confused. Did they spend the 5,000 or not? Did anybody else pick up on that? I'm looking at their letter on page 39. You know, initially they were granted funds for updating the clubhouse, the kitchen and the bar. As they got into it a little more, it sounds like it doesn't. They aren't sure if it's worth fixing. And so they've hired. They had Tim Potabom offer some advice or his opinion on some stuff, and then they have an agreement figure of 9,000 for Beck Engineering Atura Architecture.
If you look on the electronic version of it, the log cabin and the Beck Engineering are in red, so I'm assuming those are expenses from the allocation.
Have they done a study? Is that what's taking place? Or is it upcoming?
Well, it says, yeah, as of November 4th, an agreement has been signed to pursue the beginning steps of the process.
So I don't think
So that doesn't.
I'm not
yeah.
reading that anything's been done.
Right.
I can maybe provide just a little bit of light on this too. I was able to talk with a couple of their board of directors earlier this fall. I think they're looking into, I don't want to put too much light into this, but pretty extensive improvements to the clubhouse. So they worked with Beck Engineering out of Spirit Lake to help some of the engineering and architectural design of that. So I think there's a bigger picture for them as opposed to just, I'm just reading through this, just upgrading the kitchen. So, yeah. Maybe it doesn't help you, but I guess my point is I think they're looking at a bigger overall project investment in the clubhouse. Okay,
So I don't think the 5,000's been spent yet. Do they have the cash? Did they get it? They got the money, correct? And they're asking for 7,000. So is I wish there were somebody here right now. My question is, are they, what the 5,000 now, the 7,000 request, where is that going to be going? How is that going to be used?
It's outlined in there as well. It's for a driving range concrete pad for nearly 3,000, a driving range hitting mats for 3,000, and some signage for a little over 1,000. for the request to 7. That's where they're stating it's going. So,
But the 5,000 has not been spent yet, or it's been
I think it's been
reallocated.
earmarked. If it hasn't been spent, it's been earmarked.
Okay,
That's how I interpret it.
I would agree with
all right.
And there'll be an opportunity for clarification too when the agreement comes back forward, because we need to have an agreement now.
Okay.
So, and I'll find out from, I'll ask Jason Hingefeld that question, my contact.
Anything else on the golf course?
I would just say that from my initial, involvement on the council with the golf course, we have gone from an asset that was barely making it financially to a situation now where they're asking for funds to improve the asset. And so if we feel that the golf course is an asset to the community, at least we're giving the money towards improving that asset for a betterment of it, and not just to keep air in the lungs of the thing. So, not everyone may look at it that way, but that's the way it's evolved over my tenure anyway. So,
I'm sure people who play golf look at it that way.
We look at quality of life, communities, these are just little things. I mean, if you look at the city investment of $5,000 or $7,000 for an amenity such as, obviously there's some other investment that we provide. And that's a huge return as far as quality of life that we talk about. And people that love to golf, right, Terry?
They have really, since the flood, I mean, I can't believe how much better the course is. They've done some tremendous work to get back into shape. So they're trying.
Yep.
Their memberships are up last 2
Yeah.
years too.
Right.
They're working hard, and they drop membership rates down, and memberships are up, and so they're doing some good things.
Okay, let's move on.
SCDC 150th anniversary, that's fairly straightforward. Further discussion on that? Okay. And then we have the CASA request. And, it's a good organization. You'll have to decide whether you want to double their, even though it's small. Their first memo, they'd asked for a lot more than this. I recommended that told them I thought that might be a tall order in this climate. And I also recommended that they reframe their request to more of an investment request rather than a contribution request, because they are experiencing a significant loss in contribution revenue. So there are a number of counties that contribute. There are not a lot of cities.
I do have one question. Is it, maybe Scott can answer this question, do we use this organization, the police department? Okay, do you know, do they have anybody that uses them, have used them, or that you're aware of?
In the letter here, it says that it's provided services for 26 residents of Sheldon.
49 hours, 26 residents, yeah.
Okay, I didn't see that part of it. Okay, thank you.
I mean, it's unfortunate, one of the byproducts of the pandemic has been that people, this portion of the issues that these folks are dealing with has risen. And it's probably because of lock-ins and everything else that we're doing, but my guess is they're seeing an uptick in areas of being able to help too, so, for what it's worth.
So Chief, you're okay with it, $500?
Okay. I'm not hearing any negative comments or anything, so I think we can, by consensus, that's good. right, let's move into the turf discussion for the high school.
Just one question before we go into that.
Okay.
Is the county economic development, is that per capita? Is that how they come up with that number?
It's, for years, it's been like,
Yeah.
might have been 5188. And yeah, so since our population went up, it's increased.
Just trying to figure out how, okay.
Yeah.
I kind of figured that per capita.
Okay. All right. Turf for the football field. What would you like us to, where would you like us to begin?
Well, my thought is this, is you have a $30,000 placeholder in lost to 5 years to get to your $150,000 contribution. I think it's, as an annual appropriation, I think it's something that we could ask or encourage the marketing committee to look at every year too, and as their revenues hopefully improve and a new motel comes along, they would probably be willing to at least have the conversation. So I think, Kurt, they have committed how much for the coming year? It was $1,250?
Yeah, 2,500 a year for the next 5, so 12,500 over 5.
So my recommendation then would be to reduce the amount on the loss sheet to what the 27,500 and have the 2,500 come from hotel motel, and then discuss it again next year. And then before the budget meetings, we put it on a marketing committee agenda and see if they're inclined to review that amount. So it's not a static number. I mean, we're hopefully going to see an increase in those dollars.
Yeah, I think looking at it annually is the best. I do, because, yeah, I think that and maybe tying it to some kind of a barometer, economic barometer, as far as revenue is concerned on our side, might have some value too, I don't know. But, you know, it went from 250 in original request down to 150, and I think that happened because they added a scoreboard and got some extra dollars out of that, and that's good, that's good. And, I mean, the way it sounds, they're starting this year to put it in, so apparently they have funding somewhere to cover it, so if we handle it on a year-to-year basis, I think that's responsible. So.
When you say look at it and look at it on a year-by-year basis, in terms of what the marketing committee's commitment is going to be, or
well,
we as a city?
That's just another revenue option.
Well, I think either way, if we're going to commit, we have to commit to the dollar amount.
Yeah.
We can determine year by year where those dollars come from, but this meeting, we have to set whether or not we're going to commit to that dollar amount that they're asking.
Right. But where we get it from each year, I think that's
up to some, the discussion there.
I think that flexibility will help us, I think, so.
If I might, one more thing. So I have a draft 2080 agreement that Corey, a partnership agreement that Corey Meyer has given to me, and that would be on a future agenda. And it would basically commit the city to the 5-year funding process, but then we would obviously have the internal discussion, or have the discussion on how it would be divided.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else want to comment? Okay. Any of the other requests you'd like to discuss? We have the list. We haven't addressed all of them individually. Is there anyone that has a red flag? Anybody has a red flag about any of these? Can we move forward with the list as it is, as we have it presented for us?
Just for clarification's sake, Todd, you've got $75K in for the splash pad. but we're not really sure what that's going to look like yet. Is this just kind of the beginning of seeding for the project, just because you know it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark?
Estimated total project cost for that is $450,000. The Park and Recreation Board would like you to approve $150,000 project. We as staff, the budget, didn't see that in this budget, so we wanted to get some seed money started. $75,000 would allow us to take us from a very preliminary plan to maybe dial down what that final cost could be. Would allow us to get started if you wanted to, or you could just, it's a reserve, and we could wait till we have 100 and some, and then we could ask you to, to try to finish it sooner. I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of the park board, Greta is here from the park board, but I think the response might be is, thanks for something, that's better than nothing, but 6 years is a long time to wait for a project. It's a start. Budget from a staffing standpoint is it's a start, because we didn't want to push it to the side, because we do feel like it's.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I asked is because, last night we were kind of talking about, well, it could be this way if it was staffed, or this way, it could be however much you want to put into concrete, and...
Yeah, so I think you could spend anywhere from $325 to $450, realistically.
And I think we're, the Parks and Rec Board, they're firm in saying that it will be part of the outdoor pool complex.
That is the current direction the staff has from them, yes,
Okay.
is that it would be part of the pool. Not standalone. It would actually, where the proposed location is actually between the bathhouse and the maintenance building. There's some advantages to that location, because you can use the the existing pump house to house electrical equipment and recirculation pumps and that kind of sort of thing, so you don't have to build another structure.
So this would be a pay-for-entry type deal.
You would buy a day pass currently, or you would, get to utilize it as part of your membership. As far as staffing goes, and we haven't got real deep into it, but I think we will need to have a discussion of if it's inside of the fence like it's currently proposed, do you need some sort of separation barrier so that you don't have to have staff? So that it's not that far from the deep end. So that some little one doesn't wander over, and obviously there's always guards watching, but they're not always watching what's coming up behind them, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's kind of moved us into our recap, really. We're done with requests now. So any other comments or questions in terms of our recap?
One question I had was in regard to the police wages. There was a discrepancy here. Scott, your memo had asked for an increase of $100,000 to bring that total to $631,692. The total that Ange has in the city budget for wages is $574,047. So I'm just curious as to where that discrepancy is.
I put in their current wage and I calculated at 2.75% increase.
So we've got a mathematical basis there. Is your number just more of a good round number, or is there a little science behind it, or how does that look?
Yeah, mine's more of a good round number. One thing I forgot to talk about the other day too is, we're gonna have a couple more retirements coming up too. So there'll be some vacation time, sick time.
Sure, okay.
So, and then also it's just kind of to get ready for when we have to pay that 8th officer.
And then the money that we would get from USDA or whichever grant that is, that does that come off that amount as far as what is budgeted Or is that's an additional?
So we're gonna expend the money because we have to pay the wage.
Right.
So so his pay is included in the wages. However, the revenue is going to come back in on the revenue side. So it just helps their ending cash balance.
So does that revenue, so I guess that goes in a different category than wages because it's revenue? Or does it?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't just put it in to lower the wage dollar amount.
Gotcha.
It increases their revenues, which leaves them with a better cash balance.
Gotcha, okay. So, looking at the expenditures, like you said, yeah, we do have some preparation to do. But are we at a point where we know what, it's gonna, we're preparing for, 50K in payouts or anything like that, or is this a something that you just want to have to have some cushion?
Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
I'd have
Kind of depends what he uses. I mean, it's a matter of what's on the books and what's accrued whenever each one of them goes to retire, whether
Sure.
it's sick or vacation.
Okay, well, that answers my question, thank you.
Anyone else?
Are we saying that we're not voting on these all requests tonight, saying, yeah, they're approved, or?
Speak now or
Is
forever
that
hold
what
your
we're
peace,
saying
there,
right
Ken.
now?
I need a consensus if you
Yeah.
want them included in the budget or not.
Tonight, okay.
Tonight,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
So like
The
now,
consensus I was drawing from the group was that these are all approved.
Okay, I was just making sure.
But if you have one, if you want to bring up something for discussion, now would be the time, or else it will be included.
Through the whole thing, I was just thinking something my dad used to say, son, you don't always get what you want. But no, I have no other.
did not realize your dad was on the Rolling Stones.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't hear that.
And if I might,
Yes.
I'll say one more thing before we move on. Back to the turf, I want you to know from my perspective, I really like the idea of shorter commitments and not having a 10-year, 12-year, 15-year commitment out of loss. Because when that is done, when that happens, then the people that were involved in the original commitment sometimes aren't there anymore. And it's kind of forgotten, and others that are running the numbers at the organization that's receiving the money are used to it, and they're like, oh, what happened? But if you have a shorter pledge, then you don't run into the situation of as often of a request for it to continue. So I encourage us to consider short pledges of 5 years or less when we do pledge or annual pledges out of lost. I think it's good practice.
Any more comments? Directors? No? My only comment, we started this session yesterday with a blank card in front of us. And we've covered a lot of ground in the last 48 hours. I guess I'm really interested to get some of these back, whether it's splash pad in 2023 or a more generalized comment, or, but as you've gone through this, what's struck you? What do we want to do to make Sheldon better? How do we do that? And I really encourage you, as we take, the next few days, and this all kind of simmers and you think about it, fill out that card and give it back to me. I'd really like to see what comes back and where we can go with it, how it's going to impact us. Not so much the budget maybe, but how it's going to impact the community long term. So, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I do have one more question. We've had numerous departments asking for more employees and more wages, and sooner or later, we need to address that. And I don't think we're given the green light yet for any of those new employees, higher wages yet. Are we approving those tonight as we move forward?
Kind of what I was asking.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't think I think the only change to the budget that we have here was the benefits levy, right?
Yeah. But I mean, we've had departments request additional employees, and I think it's fair to them, so they have an idea when decisions, and we've had, a 6% increase asked. How do we justify that compared to the other employees? And I think those questions need to be asked here before we approve this budget.
I might. So, let's start with the library, while I write down the others that you mentioned. So, the original request was 6% across the board, and I think 10 cents each for the pages. And then I think what came out of the discussion yesterday was 2.75 for our benefited full-time director, 6% for the part-time employees, and then how much, Angie, for
$9 for the pages.
to go to an even $9
Yep.
to the pages. So I sense there was support for that.
I think there's parity there with,
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep.
So, if we have consensus, we can,
Is that just the cost of living increase? What is the purpose of the increase? Is it because of the experience, cost of living, cost of inflation, what?
yes.
All of the above.
all the above.
Which, when we get a cost of living raise,
Yeah,
simplicity means the cost of living goes up because it, just something to throw in the mix. Simplicity, but cost of living raises increases the cost of living, which your raise doesn't do much. Would you stop that? Now, if I knew that answer.
Well, I'm not going to make Sheldon the model to try and block decades of, if not centuries, of forward progress.
I know it's simplicity, but I think we need to, in the back of our mind, sometimes think that way.
Well,
I'm saying that's as simple as you can get. I mean, I'm not saying that's the philosophy, but I'm just saying, in the mix of everything, we need to kind of keep that in mind.
well, everything improves, right?
Right. Well, experience, growth, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, and that's why I ask, what are the purposes of these increases?
Well, if you look at, so just take cost of living, for example. It's going to cost more to hire someone new, train them, onboard them, than it would be to just give them the cost of living raise so that
I'm not saying they don't get it, but I'm just saying when we...
Well, I'm just saying,
look
yeah,
at
and
that-
all I'm saying is that there's reasons why that it happens other than just trying to keep up with
So you're
the
saying
Joneses.
experience
Well,
is
yeah.
part of this?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what...
I'm sure every department has their own reasons when they discussed what they were gonna ask for. The part that we don't know is where the marketplace is going,
Right.
okay? I think everyone, not just cities, but everyone is experiencing that kind of thing. Where's the marketplace going? And if you have that crystal ball and a solid answer, then we wouldn't be sitting here.
My general consensus is that we're probably underestimating where we really should be at in regards to some of this. And we'll find out over the next 12 months.
Right.
But there are real ramifications, and what Wayne brought up is a reality of any business who hires, is that they'll hire someone, they'll offer an attractive wage, and the guy across the street offer a little bit more, and they just keep jumping around. So,
It just keeps jumping and jumping.
so if we want a stable workforce to continue the good work of the city, I think we need to look at it from that perspective, because the environment, the hiring of the environment and the labor pool environment as it is right now, we need to be aware of that.
And I'm not knocking it, I'm not.
No,
denying
I'm
it,
not
but
saying you are, but I'm
saying-
just giving you good reason on why.
Oh,
Uh,
I can give you 100 good reasons.
yeah.
But I'm just saying sometimes, well, go back to daddy. We don't always get what we want either. I mean, I'd like to write Social Security and say, I need a bigger increase.
But you do get an increase every year.
Yeah, not every year, but
Yeah.
every year.
This year you got what, 5 or 6%, right?
This
Yeah.
is the biggest one since I've been on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I guess what concerns me is that we're looking out so far
Yeah.
and trying to guess that that's going to be adequate. That's why I asked the question about, do we have some flexibility? Can we, and obviously we do, we can take a project that we're looking at down the road, and if push comes to shove, we can choose to, as we have done with the water tower for, I don't know how many times we shoved that down the road, because we felt it couldn't fit. So I think we're in good shape as far as having some places where we could deal with some unanticipated things to deal with. So I'm pretty comfortable with it.
And Angie, our bottom line, does our budget that we sit here today line up with what you figure the income would be? And that's hard to figure. I know you don't know what it's gonna be.
It is, especially with increasing the employee benefits levy, because that's going to bring in more dollars on the revenue side. But like I said, I mean, when you look at the projected revenues and the projected expenditures, yes, the expenditures are more, but it's because we have cash on hand for the projects that are going to be expended in the future fiscal year.
And our revenues as we grow are more, right?
Yeah.
We hope.
Yep.
Just want to make sure we stay within our means.
So in this situation, and I'm gonna just pull the splash pad as an example, because it's a big project, we have a pool. I'm on the fence a little bit about it right now without, we just heard about it today. If we have unexpected expenses, a downturn in revenues, we've committed $75,000 to the splash pad today. Do they get that regardless, or can we back that out of the budget and shift it somewhere else? In my mind it is, but that's why,
Yeah, because we're only negotiating with ourselves here. It's not like a deal with the school where there's a 28E agreement involved.
Right.
We're not legally bound to give ourselves money.
But Parks and Rec is counting on that. They start making plans, but a year from now,
I mean,
whatever,
it might be just a crappy thing to do to pull the rug out, but
It would be, I realize,
but it's not. I don't think it's not outside of the bounds of our possibility.
there are many things in here that are needs, and there are some that are wants. I would put that in a want category more so than a need.
Mayor, how the budget was proposed, we're all staff putting it together. How I envision this happening is if you approve the 75,000, it's a placeholder for a future project. I'll tell the Park and Rec Board that. What I would anticipate they will say is, let's hold off and see if we get the placeholder again, or potentially they'll say, hey, let's maybe see if we can get an engineering services agreement to further our research. Well, if they're going to go into a contract with the engineering services agreement, that's going to come back to the council and have to get approval. At that point, you would approve expenditure of some of that 75,000, if that even happens in the upcoming budget. I need to leave that decision up to the Park and Rec Board, at least their discussion on whether they want to sit or extend research. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Every budget has a vision cooked into it, whether it be mine at home or whether it be the city of Sheldon. stuff that we're talking about here is part of that vision, and I think it's all right to start addressing it early. I'd rather do that than have them come and say, I need 400,000 out of next year's budget to do this. I've experienced that in this chair already, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have a process of really understanding the value that we're is being put forth by the opportunity. This is the right way to do it. And if we have a situation where we're shortfall, we need to go after some funds. That there's plenty of those out there for us to do that with. So I think we got a good solid budget. I think we got some vision in there. I think we've got a plan for the human resource requirements to run this city in this budget. So let's move forward with it. So.
I hope you didn't think I didn't want people to have raises. I mean, I just, in all our planning and thinking, just keep things within reason. And like, who said it? You? About something, we want, oh, no, Greg, our wants and our needs. And so I don't want to be the simplicity about it, but just put it in our thinking all the way around that. And I think the raise.
I can see you're going to be a good councilman because we all do that every time we come and sit down and make decisions about this. What is the want and what is the need?
Right.
You'll see that you'll be playing that out as the year goes on. So,
my family.
Yeah.
And don't overextend.
Right.
Sam has a couple of closing comments here.
Thank you, Mayor. So to finish the discussion with answer Brad's remaining questions, the part-timer for Pavilion, we sense that there was consensus to move forward with that. That's included in the budget. The full-time employee for Kristen and I, that is included in the budget, but I think there probably needs to be more discussion on that before that we actually move forward on that, because we're, for a couple of reasons, taking a look at how it impacts our other employees if we need to make some changes there, and also the emergency services task force concept that I had brought up on the first day. Then as far as the officer pay for fire department, EMA, I think, Scat, did you ask for officer increases this year? Okay, you didn't, but EMA and fire did. Those are included, subject to the resolution that would come forward this spring to approve that. But that is included, and I think for fire it was 10%. What was it for EMA? Do you remember?
I think it was a little bit more than that, just because we were wanting to get a little bit more in line with fire, because we haven't raised them in 25 years. Yeah.
Brad, did I get that right?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Snyder.